Hello and welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Toibonjo Bella, the host for tonight's edition. Let's have a quick look at today's front page of Namibian Sun. Tonight in the studio, we are joined by Vita Angula, who is a socio-political commentator and a regular now on this show, to talk to us, of course, about the regional and local authority elections that are taking place tomorrow in the country and issues there too. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So, tomorrow, big day. Probably the... in a lot of ways, this election is historic in its own way. What has been your observation as far as the build-up to tomorrow is concerned? The campaigns, the campaign promises, everything.
What I definitely noticed with these elections, I think it's the most contested local government elections in the history of Namibia.
Yeah.
As we were discussing before, the number of candidates, I think it's also the most. I didn't get time to go through. But you talked about 493 candidates representing 18 political parties and 13 associations competing in 121 constituencies, and of these, 93 are independent candidates. So what you can see is definitely a rise in independent candidates. The last previous election, I think we had a few independent candidates. The one I could remember clearly is five.
There were five.
Okay. The prominent one was from the Omaheke region, who actually won. He was a member of the ruling party, but he ran as an independent.
Yes.
And he actually won. So I don't know whether in these elections, some of the independent candidates are actually going to score points. But what I did see on the news, it was in the Zambezi region where there is actually a very popular independent candidate. If it's not Zambezi, it's Kavango, who actually drew larger crowds than the political parties. So definitely the message is, because of the structural nature of political parties, people are opting to run as independents so that they can bring development directly to their people without going through the different the structured bureaucracy of political parties. So it's definitely one thing that I've seen.
Now, speaking of independent candidates, Vitalio, you spoke about, you only pointed at the structural bureaucracy of political formations as perhaps the reason why they would have independent candidates took shortcuts to become independents and directly vie for office. But do you think that is really the reason why we have many independent candidates? What are the other factors that might have contributed to having this surge in independent candidates?
One of the factors one can allude to is frustration with political parties. I've already mentioned that. Then also, I think, I don't want to say it, but a lot of people are also seeing these council seats as a gateway to employment. The employment rate in Namibia is quite high. And people are vying because some of the independent candidates that I've seen actually, even when it comes to articulation, when it comes to their understanding of politics, it's not that they are not really well versed. So why would they want to vie for office? I don't always think sometimes it's for development of those constituencies, but sometimes people are also looking for job opportunities, and this is one of them.
Yeah, and what dynamic does this phenomenon bring to this election, having so many independent candidates?
We have a split in votes. So split in votes can help, they can materialize in two, or also a number of ways, but I'll stick to two. What we'll see is a fragmentation of votes, and then the ruling party, which is using state machinery, which has always had dominant authority, dominant numbers, we'll see them actually emerging victorious from these elections, because what the independent candidates have done is they've split the votes of everybody, meaning that everybody's votes have been deducted. So the trend would be that the ruling party would still remain on top, and then the other popular parties with actually a support base in the different constituencies will also maintain their status quo, and the independent candidates will take away, I think, from different parties, but the status quo would remain. That is one thing I can actually predict.
So SWAPO will win predominantly. You said you were sort of giving a chronology. You said independent candidates will bite into all the parties, and then it will be SWAPO, popular parties, and stuff like that. Is that how you see it, the trend emerging? Yeah,
that's how I see it actually materializing. I see the ruling party taking most of the constituencies, remaining dominant. I see new players coming in little towns. Then I don't see independent candidates doing very well. The independent candidate I think I've got my eyes on who might do well is the lady for Ondangwa Urban, Emmanuel. I don't remember her surname. Angelina Emmanuel. She did well in the by-election last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, last year, yes.
Last year she did good in the election, so she's already set. She's already got a voters base. So she might actually increase. She didn't lose by that much. So you might see her actually emerging. But of the other independent candidates, I think most of them are very new. They do not really have the financial capital to run or to convince or to pull crowds. So I don't see them doing very well, but I see the independent candidate phenomenon actually rising, whereby in future they will do well.
Let's talk about Windhoek briefly, Vitalio. How do you see Windhoek emerging out of this election, the city council in particular?
Windhoek is one of the biggest, it is actually the biggest, it's a capital city. I see SWAPO retaining a stronghold of the council. I see IPC, PDM, and LPM actually also having representation there. I also see AR having representation there, but I think it will predominantly be a SWAPO council. And one thing, and if my prediction comes true, one thing political parties, opposition political parties, and independent candidates must look at in future is forming coalitions. Because if they stand alone, they will always be dominated by the current the current organization, which is actually predominating.
Walvis Bay, it has been a problematic locality now in 2 elections running. That was the last year's election, and then again the by-election in February this year. Having seen the contestation for space there, what do you expect?
Walvis Bay is one of those, it's also a cosmopolitan city. Not a city, but cosmopolitan town, like Windhoek and Swakopmund. It's also a first-tier municipality. What we saw, Walvis Bay still has a hangover from fish rot. And we saw the independent candidate from last year who now formed a political party, IPC, Dr. Panduleni Itula. He still commands a lot of respect amongst the residents of Walvis Bay. I saw him drawing very huge crowds, but the question is always, do crowds translate to votes? So that is what we are going to see in these elections. What we saw in the previous elections, national elections of 2019, is that his crowds actually did transform into votes. because he did very well. So if 2019 is anything to go by, I think the SWAPO party might actually have a challenge there. Then we have the independent candidate, Knowledge Pinge, who is actually also very well known in his constituency. He actually won the by-election in his constituency, so we might see him emerging there. He decided to run as an independent candidate, even though he's affiliated to AR. So we want to see how that dynamic will play, because we know that AR definitely campaigned for them. And we also saw AR and IPC at loggerheads with each other, so they, in fact, divided their votes. So it remains like next year or the next local authority elections, depending on how these ones play out, will they want to form a coalition to unseat the ruling party, or would they just want to enter council so that they can have their interests served? So I think also this is not necessarily a national election, it's a local authority election. So it's about actually having diverse voices and diverse candidates on the councils, and not necessarily unseating a council which you feel is dominated by a certain political party.
Yeah. One of the dominant narratives of the ruling party in particular, I've seen Netumbo Ndaitwah mentioning it, I've seen Safia Shaningwa mentioning it, to say that when they went around campaigning, they were saying, look, vote for us, because if you mix us too much with opposition on these councils, they will just frustrate our efforts to develop the country and whatnot. Which one is a healthier system? Is it to have a good mix of different political representatives on a council, like a local authority council, or is it more effective when you have a dominance, overwhelming dominance of one formation?
I do not agree with the sentiments of Shaningwa and Ndaitwah, because when you are elected to a council, they elect the party and they elect also an individual. So you want an individual who's going to develop. So you're not necessarily voting for a party, because a party doesn't always put the most able candidate. Sometimes they give the most deserving candidate who has maybe what they call it tried and tested leader, who's always at the rallies, and they feel this person deserves a reward. But is that person really the person to deliver the services in the local authority space? When she's saying that they are going to frustrate the development, I think it's you are presupposing what people would do. Who says that once elected to council that people are not going to work together for the good of their constituency? It's like they are saying, if you don't, it's like indirectly they are saying, if you don't vote for us, we are going to frustrate the opposition. Not necessarily that the opposition is going to frustrate them, because you have an agency as somebody elected to a local authority to develop for your constituents, not for your party, because your constituency is made up of different people from different parties. So it must be service delivery for the people, because once the campaign is done, it's done. We have elections every 5 years, local authority every 5 years, national every 5 years. So once our competition is done, we have to unite and work together for the citizens.
Yes.
We cannot have a situation whereby people, because you are from RDP and I'm from SWAPO, we are already premeditating that we are not going to get along, simply of the fact that we are from two different parties. It shouldn't work that way. That should not be the idea. Yeah,
because I mean, as a collective also you would want to leave a legacy behind, as a conglomeration of councillors from different parties, but as a collective now, forming that council, ideally, you would want to say, we were the councillors for this period of 5 years, and this is what the legacy that we left behind. I suppose I agree. So, briefly, let's talk about I've seen, you see, you alluded slightly to the quality of candidates being deployed. I saw IPC, for example, has put minimum requirements to say that for you to stand as an IPC candidate, you must have a minimum disqualification. In SWAPO, it has been a concern for years that not only SWAPO, but all the parties that existed before, that there was never such a minimum requirement. Anybody who beats anyone at the primaries or whatever, whether they are only popular within the party but do not really have the necessary skills, will make it to council. Do you think we must be deliberate as a country to say, whether it's in the Electoral Act or that political parties do it internally, to say, going forward, we need this minimum skills for anyone to stand on our ticket?
That would be anti-competitive, anti-democratic, and also discriminatory.
Why?
Because if you put a skill set, there are times somebody with a degree might not be able to deliver or might not have the heart of the people as somebody maybe with grade 6. And it doesn't mean just because you have a degree you are more well-read than somebody with grade 6. There are people who do self-learning actually. But
it happens even in the corporate space. All the CEOs are supposed to have this. You don't just say, oh, because a CEO with an MBA might not deliver, let's just put a grade 6. You don't do that. Yeah. Why should politics be different?
No, because politics is different from the corporate space. The corporate space is not necessarily a democratic space. You are competing on the basis of the applications. There are people soothing through their applications who are going to choose their favorite, the most qualified. Yeah. But democracy gives a chance for every citizen to participate. Now, your question begs the question, if you are going to put requirements for people to stand as councillors, are you also going to put requirements for people to become voters? Then people might as well say that, oh, only those with grade 12 can vote in an election.
But voters want quality representatives. You, as a voter, I want to be represented by a person who possesses a certain level of understanding. Whether they will not deliver now or later, or they are lazy or whatever, that's a different thing. But I want to be represented on a council of Windhoek by someone who can read the financials of the city of Windhoek, who can understand that there's corruption in this thing, because when I'm reading through these financials, there are some anomalies and stuff like that. If you give me someone, just anyone there, not anyone can decipher what is contained on this report. So as a voter, personally, I would ordinarily want to have someone with minimum qualification. But that is just me, really.
Yeah. But the basic principle is that as a voter, I can elect, but I can also be elected. So if we go with your proposal, you are taking away somebody's right to be elected just because of them not attaining an academic qualification. But there are a lot of people without academic qualification, but in social skills, they are better than those with academic skills. In organizational skills, they are better than those with grade 12. In business skills, they might even be better than those with grade 12. Even they might be well-read, they just don't have that official diploma or that official grade 6 or that official document which says that they've passed a certain level. So let us not only judge people on the facet of academics. Academics is only one part that makes somebody a good leader. There are also other facets of that can make somebody a good, able, and quality leader to be elected onto a local authority.
You don't agree, Vitalia, that on average, a constituency councillor with a certain, who was maybe a former school teacher or was a school teacher now, and somehow, makes it to become the councillor, and a grade 8 dropout, you don't think that on average, the one with a better qualification would be able to, because remember, when you're a councillor, you have to read the National Development Plans, Vision 2030, NDP 5, everything like that, the SDGs of the UN and everything. Are you telling me that on average, a guy with a qualification is just the same as the one without the qualification? They can just become councillor because democracy says everybody can stand?
In the future, we can look at it, but given our country's history, where not everybody got a chance to get an education, it's unfair for those who didn't get an education to be excluded. But in the future, given that we now have universal education in Namibia, where education is free, everybody's got a right to education. Actually, children it's compulsory for children to a certain age to be enrolled in school. So in future, we can say that, okay, there is a minimum requirement because the state has put the right structures or environment in places where everybody had an equal chance to get an education. But as far as history is concerned, not everybody had an equal chance. So it's definitely something we can look out for in the future. But I think it's premeditated, because look, if I've got a disability and I want to run for council, and you are saying, yeah, but we are going to have to travel and we cannot always travel with your wheelchair, you are going to be an inconvenience to us. What does it make about the rights of the disabled in the country? Yeah. So we should always, when we look at these things, we should always look at them holistically, and we should always try, like our constitution aims for us to be an inclusive society and not to seek exclusivity based on academic or disability or gender or economic capability.
I hear you. Thank you very much for coming today.
Oh, that's all you have for me today. I thought you would have more.
No, the time doesn't allow.
Okay, thank you very much for having me, Tavi.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is Vita Angula. He's a socio-political commentator who has come to the show before, and he returned today to give us his views about tomorrow's regional and local authority elections and how he sees it panning out. Thank you for watching, and go and vote tomorrow. Good night.